William Shakespeare was born in April 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, a market town in Warwickshire, England. He was baptized on April 26th, and based on local custom, his birth is traditionally celebrated on April 23rd. His father, John Shakespeare, was a glovemaker and local civic leader, while his mother, Mary Arden, came from a prominent farming family. William grew up during a period of religious tension and expanding literacy, surrounded by stories, festivals, and a strong oral tradition. He likely attended the King's New School, where he studied Latin grammar, classical literature, and rhetoric, training that would later shape his writing, although details of his early youth are limited. The environment of Stratford, with its craftspeople, travelers, and performances by touring actors, exposed him to language and storytelling. His early life laid the foundation for the imaginative and linguistic talent that would define his career. Shakespeare did not attend a university, but he received a rigorous grammar school education typical for talented boys of his social class. At the King's New School, he would have studied works by Ovid, Cicero, Seneca, and Virgil, reading and translating Latin daily. These classical texts strongly influenced his later plays, providing themes of mythology, politics, tragedy, and comedy. Elizabethan England itself was an important influence. Public debates about monarchy, exploration, science, and religion shaped his understanding of human behavior. He grew up during a flourishing of the arts, as England sought its own literary identity. Although records are sparse, it is clear that Shakespeare emerged from school with a powerful command of language and an awareness of the dramatic traditions of his time. These early influences appear throughout his work, from Roman histories to mythological references and complex political themes. At age 18, Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway, a woman from a neighboring village who was 8 years older than he was. Their marriage license was issued in November 1582, and their first child, Susanna, was baptized in May 1583. Twins, Hamnet and Judith, followed in 1585. Little is known about their personal relationship, but Shakespeare's family remained in Stratford even after he began spending much of his time in London. The death of his son Hamnet at age 11 was a significant event in his life, occurring in 1596. Some scholars note echoes of this loss in later plays, though no direct evidence links specific works to personal grief. Despite his rising fame in London's theatre world, Shakespeare maintained financial and legal ties to Stratford. By the early 1600s, he had become a substantial property owner, supporting his parents and securing his family's economic position. From about 1585 to 1592, historical records provide almost no information about Shakespeare's activities, years often called the lost years. Various theories suggest he may have worked as a teacher, a law clerk, or an actor's apprentice, but no confirmed evidence supports any single explanation. By 1592, however, he was clearly established in London as both an actor and a playwright. That year, dramatist. Robert Greene criticized him in print, calling him an upstart who was competing with university-educated writers, proof that Shakespeare had already become a noticeable figure in the theater scene. His earliest known plays, such as Henry VI and the Comedy of Errors, were written during this period. Though the details of his transition are unclear, his arrival in the London theater world marked the beginning of one of the most influential careers in literary history. During the early 1590s, Shakespeare rapidly gained recognition for his talent. He wrote both plays and poetry, including 2 long narrative poems, Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece, which he dedicated to Henry Wriothesley, the Earl of Southampton. These dedications suggest that Shakespeare had secured an important patron. Theaters were temporarily closed during outbreaks of plague, so poetry provided a stable alternative income. When theaters reopened, Shakespeare's plays quickly drew attention for their compelling characters, witty dialogue, and emotional depth. By the mid-1590s, he was not only a writer, but a shareholder in the Lord Chamberlain's Men, one of London's leading acting companies. His dual role as actor and playwright gave him practical insight into staging, performance, and audience expectations, helping him refine the techniques that would make his works enduringly influential. In 1599, Shakespeare and his colleagues built the Globe Theatre, located on the south bank of the Thames. As a shareholder in the company and the theatre itself, Shakespeare benefited financially from its success. The Globe became the primary venue for many of his most famous plays, including Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Othello, and King Lear. The building's open-air design, large standing audience area, and thrust stage shaped how his plays were written and performed. Shakespeare continued to act with the company while producing increasingly ambitious works that explored themes of power, identity, love, and betrayal. The Globe was not just a workplace, but a creative laboratory where Shakespeare collaborated with actors, revised scripts, and responded to audience reactions. Its influence on his artistic development was significant, providing the setting where many of his greatest achievements reached the public. In 1603, after the death of Queen Elizabeth I, the Lord Chamberlain's Men gained royal patronage from the new monarch, becoming the King's Men. This elevated the company's status and provided greater financial security. Shakespeare's later works reflected a shift toward more complex, contemplative stories. He wrote tragedies such as Macbeth, Antony and Cleopatra, and Coriolanus, followed by the late romances, including The Winter's Tale and The Tempest. These plays often blended sorrow with reconciliation and explored themes of forgiveness, aging, and political change. During this period, the company also began performing at the Blackfriars Theatre, an indoor venue that allowed for more elaborate staging and attracted wealthier audiences. Shakespeare's writing grew more experimental as he adapted to different performance spaces and continued refining his craft. Around 1613, Shakespeare appears to have largely retired from full-time work in London and returned to Stratford-upon-Avon. Where he had long been a landowner, he invested in property, including a large home known as New Place, and took part in local business and legal matters. His final years were quieter than his decades in the theater, though he remained involved in some literary collaborations. The play Henry VIII was staged in 1613, and during one performance, the Globe Theatre accidentally burned down due to a misfired cannon used for special effects. Shakespeare seems to have written little after this period. Although he stepped back from public life, he maintained connections with the theatrical community and continued to manage his financial affairs. William Shakespeare died on April 23, 1616, at the age of 52 in Stratford-upon-Avon. The cause of his death is unknown, as no contemporary description survives. He was buried in Holy Trinity Church, where his grave remains today. His final will, drafted shortly before his death, details his substantial property holdings and bequests to family and charitable causes. Despite his relatively young age, he left behind a considerable estate, reflecting the financial success he achieved through writing and theater. His burial in Stratford, rather than London, highlights his continued ties to his hometown. Though his life ended quietly, his works had already begun to circulate widely, ensuring that his reputation would grow long after his death. Shakespeare's legacy is unmatched in the history of literature. His plays, spanning tragedies, comedies, histories, and romances, explore universal human experiences with insight and linguistic brilliance. After his death, his colleagues John Heminges and Henry Condell published the first folio in 1623, preserving 36 of his plays, many of which might otherwise have been lost. Over the centuries, his works have been translated into every major language, performed more than those of any other playwright, and studied across disciplines ranging from literature and history to psychology and politics. His influence extends into everyday speech, where many phrases he coined remain in use. Shakespeare's ability to capture the complexity of human nature has made him a central figure in world culture, and his writings continue to shape theater, storytelling, and language worldwide.